So I'm joining from Monash University of Melbourne. So I would like to begin by acknowledging the traditional owners of this land, the Wurundjeri Woi-wurrung and Boon people of the Kulin Nation, and recognize their continuing connection to the land and waterways. We pay our respect to their elder past, present, and emerging, and extend this respect to all Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander peoples. Hello, everyone, and thank you so much for joining us today. My name is Mana Biabani, and I'm the chair of ACNS ECR committee this year. I'm very pleased to launch our first webinar of the year, Beyond Publications. And today we'll hear from two fantastic speakers, Dr. Brooke Nickel and Dr. Mark Williams, who will share insights on an important question. In today's academic landscape, how we can best invest our time and effort to build a strong and visible research profile beyond traditional publications. Without further ado, I will hand it over to Saurabh, our event manager, to introduce the speakers and run through the logistics. Thank you very much. Saurabh?
Thank you, Mana.
No worries.
Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome, as Mana said, to today's ACNS webinar. I'm Saurabh. I'll chair today's session. It's wonderful to see a lot of participants today. So given the topic seems very timely. Before I begin, I'd like to acknowledge and sincerely thank the ACNS events team and the subcommittee members to help organize this seminar. And before we actually begin the talks, I just want to quickly give some housekeeping items or rules before we get started, okay? So please keep your microphones muted during the talks to minimize the background noise. And cameras are entirely up to you, but do note that the session is being recorded. The session will run for an hour, and we have two fantastic speakers lined up. Each talk will be roughly 18 minutes or so, and depending on time, we can take 1 or 2 questions for each speaker. And at the end, I'll open it up for the last 10 minutes for an open discussion. And we'd love for this to be an interactive session, so please pop up your questions into the chat, and I'll try to take as many as them depending on time. Okay, so wonderful. Let's get started. It's my pleasure to introduce our first speaker, Dr. Brooke Nickel, who is an NHMRC Emerging Leader, Research Fellow at the University of Sydney School of Public Health, where she's part of the Sydney Health Literacy Lab. Her research focuses on evidence-based healthcare communication and decision-making. She has published in prestigious journals, including the BMJ, JAMA, Lancet series, and featured in prestigious international media, including the New York Times, The Guardian, The Conversation. She's also won a lot of awards, including the New South Wales Young Tall Poppy Science Award, the New South Wales Premier's Outstanding Early Career Cancer Award, and the International Lisa Schwartz Prize for Communications and Benefits. Today, Brooke will be sharing what has worked and what hasn't worked for enhancing her CV and ECR visibility. So, Brooke, over to you.
Thanks so much. Can everyone hear me and see my slides? Yep, great. So yeah, thanks so much for inviting me to speak today. I guess just to preface my talk, I will be sharing what has worked for me and what hasn't worked for me. I think that's important because some of the things that have worked for me might not work for you and vice versa. So just trying to share some of my insights and my experiences. So I hope it is helpful, and I'm very happy to take any questions or comments at the end. And before I begin, I will also just acknowledge the traditional owners on the lands on which I am zooming in from today, the Camaragal people of the Eora Nation, and pay my respects to elders past and present, and extend those to any Aboriginal or Torres Strait Islander people on the call today. So just a little bit about me before I begin. So I am, as was introduced, I'm an NHMRC early career research fellow. So I have an EL1 investigator grant, and I'm also senior research fellow at the University of Sydney in the School of Public Health. My research is always focused on evidence-based healthcare communication and decision-making with a very public health lens. I've been particularly focused in the area of cancer, but I've also worked across a number of different conditions and other public health topics, all with the kind of lens of health literacy and health communication. apply to it. And I'm just over 5 years post PhD, and I've had two extended periods of parental leave in that time. So I have two young children. And how I got here, well, I guess just to say that maybe many of you are on the call. I'm not sure if it's just if there are PhD students or just early career researchers here, but probably like many of you, your PhD may have been opportunistic, or you may have not always thought that that's the path you were going to go. And it definitely wasn't for me. I had no plans of ever really doing a PhD, but kind of the opportunity arose and I took it. And I've kind of just been riding the wave of being a research scientist ever since. Um, and during my PhD and my kind of the last 5 years since being an early career researcher, I've really tried to build up opportunities as much as I can beyond just publishing. I've served on numerous committees. I've taken up supervision or co-supervision opportunities and also other co-authorship opportunities. And I really always kind of went in with this idea of I'm not sure what I'm going to do next. And 5 years into my career, I'm still not sure whether I'll stay in research or whether I'll be successful in the difficult funding landscape to stay in. So I guess I've always kind of had this idea in the back of my mind that I'm going to try and build up my CV as much as I can so that I, can give myself the best chance for fellowships, but also for other potential opportunities, whether that's going into being an academic teaching, working for government or industry, wherever that might lead me. I've just really tried to diversify my networks and gain different kind of experiences to build up my CV. I've also really tried to focus since my PhD on doing and working in kind of novel areas where, the topics might be a little bit controversial or a little bit, not as aligned with maybe, mainstream areas of interest in that topic or that setting, but also really trying to make it policy and practice relevant. And I'll talk a little bit more about that as I go through. But I guess the three kind of things that have, I think, stood out for me and made me successful in getting investigator grant and also, having a little bit of success in my overall kind of track record have really been around building up my media experience and exposure, giving talks such as these ones to different groups and organizations, and applying for prizes, and a little bit social media as well, which I know is kind of the focus of this webinar today. So I'll talk about that as well. So in my PhD, I was my final study of my PhD. Actually, I was really lucky to have a lot of media interest in it, and that kind of came about because it was published in a major international journal, the BMJ, which is a big journal in general medical field that I'm in. And so we approached our university media office just saying, we have this study coming out. Would you be interested in covering it? And they kind of said, yeah, we would. And we put out a little press release and we weren't really sure how it would take off. But I woke up the day the paper came out at 6 a.m, looked at my phone and had about 20 texts saying, you're on the front page of the Sydney Morning Herald, and, getting texts from journalists, the BBC, various different outlets. And it was really my first dive into that. I had done a very little, comments here or there in my other studies in my PhD and had engagement in the media. But I guess I really wasn't prepared for what that kind of whirlwind was like. And one of my colleagues kind of described it as, jumping out of an airplane. It's so exciting, but it's also completely terrifying. And I don't particularly think I did a great job in that. I was definitely thrown in the deep end in a lot of interviews that I wasn't necessarily prepared for. So after that, I thought, yeah, that was really exciting. It gave me a really good profile across the university and, within my research field. And it gave me a really nice kind of blurb to write in my investigator grant application. But I thought, okay, I need to get a little bit of training in this. And so I did a little bit more training and I did a little bit more, thinking about how I could do that better. And since that, I've continued to kind of put my research out there as much as I can in the media. And, that is, easier said than done. I just want to acknowledge that every paper you write isn't going to get picked up by the media. It definitely has not been the case for me, but I've been strategic when I have a paper that's being published in a more major international journal, that I try to liaise with my media office and see if they're interested in covering it. And since kind of my first interaction as well, I've started to build up contacts within the media. So having, personal emails of journalists that I know or now know, and even cold calling them. When this paper came out, I sent just a few random emails to some journalists at The Guardian and the ABC and people that I had kind of had their emails lying around from other experiences or from colleagues. And I sent them an email, and I was kind of told by my colleagues that, worst case, they're never going to answer you, and best case, they are. And so the stakes I'd always thought were kind of low in that regard, that I'll send an email, nothing will come of it. So why not? And so that has really helped as well as I've went along and been able to gain some targeted media exposure in that way when the university wouldn't necessarily support me, acknowledging that they have a big portfolio and people to support all the time, and they can't cover all the work that everyone is doing. I recently had a bit of media on a big randomized control trial I put out, and I guess I'm just showing this because the narrative around this media was not in line with kind of the popular culture narrative around breast cancer screening, and we knew that was going to be the case when the study came out, and so our media office actually said that they weren't going to cover it in any great detail, and that we had to kind of be strategic in what media we worked with to kind of get the nuanced message out so that we weren't kind of ruffling too many feathers in kind of the communities in which we worked in. And unfortunately, we did still ruffle some of those feathers, and we got a little bit of backlash from one of the main consumer organizations in breast cancer that we had worked with in the past, and that kind of are really in line with the work that we're doing. I got numerous kind of emails, phone calls, social media commentary, and comments at conferences. And I guess I'm just wanted to share that to say that when you are working in the media or saying things in the media, it doesn't always come out as nuanced as you might want it. You kind of have to be prepared for that. And I knew that. The media will sensationalize a little bit more than we're all used to as academics when we write our beautiful discussions talking about the caveats and the limitations and all the different nuances that are come out in our research. The media wants kind of one sentence in the headline, and that kind of can be interpreted in various different ways. And so there have been challenges. It hasn't all been rosy, it's been beneficial for my CV in many ways, but I think you have to also be prepared for some potential pushback or, people not agreeing with what you're saying. And I think that's okay. And that's what makes, science and what we're doing important. And for me, I think I've always tried to just see the bigger picture of that. I'm a public health researcher, and the work that I do should be communicated to the public because those are the people that I'm doing the research for. And so I've tried to really value that and take that approach moving forward when thinking about, do I really want to say this, or do I really want to go out there and put myself out there in the media? The other thing I think that can help kind of enhance visibility as an ECR is doing talks for other groups outside of yours. These are a few recent talks or a few talks that I've given to, clinician groups, but also consumer groups. And, putting yourself out there in webinars. Often these are recorded. They're put on YouTube so people can watch them. They can see you. It comes up in Google when they're searching, the topic or your name or things. So that can really help, and I think is important. And I also think it's just a really great way for you to build up your confidence in giving talks and communicating your message to different audiences. The other thing that's helped me quite a bit is in my visibility is applying for awards. And I guess just to say that, for every 10 awards I've applied for, my success rate is probably 10% or less. It's kind of the same with when you're, submitting a publication to a major journal. There's a lot of rejection, and, similarly when you're applying for fellowships or grants, there's a lot of rejection involved. But I think you've got to be in it to win it. You've got to put yourself out there. You can tap colleagues on the shoulder to nominate you. And this took me a long time to be comfortable with doing these things. I think others can probably relate that, as academics, we're not always as comfortable talking ourselves up But I think you have to a little bit, and even more so in kind of the, visible world that we're in. And there's no harm or shame in doing that, because everyone is doing really good work, and yeah, it's not, to be credited for that should be nothing that you should be embarrassed about. But I know it does take time. You probably need to be, sometimes you can be strategic, go for little quick wins, and all those kind of things can build up to bigger wins down the track. And then I know kind of the brief was to talk a little bit about social media. And I guess for me, to be perfectly explicit, I'm definitely more comfortable saying things in the media than putting myself out there on social media. And it's funny because I actually work in the social media space now, but I wouldn't say I have a large social media presence at all. And when I think about social media, those are kind of the emojis that I feel internally about writing on social media or engaging in it. But I know how important it is, and I know how much, you can put you can speak to the media, and the report or the article or the program only gets seen by thousands or a couple of hundred thousands, where you can put out a social media post and it can be seen by hundreds of thousands and millions. And I think the reach on social media is ever more increasing. I can't quote them at the minute, but there's really strong stats to show that this is where people are getting their news and their information from now. And so I think we all need to be on there to some degree. And for me, the degree that I've tried to be on social media, being kind of more uncomfortable with that space, has really been in kind of sharing my success and my research on there. So, creating visibility around my research papers, being able to communicate that to different audiences and reach different audiences, I think has been really an important space for me. Getting recognition of the work from people who might not otherwise see it. I've definitely made connections in networking. I remember the first time I only got LinkedIn, I think maybe last year. I've been on LinkedIn for a very little time, but the first time I got my first kind of LinkedIn networking private message, and we're still in really good context, to someone in the US, and she wanted me to write a piece for this kind of conversation like health journal that she was doing. And we're still in touch, and also other related opportunities. I go on there now probably more than anywhere to hear about what's happening in the world of academia and my field and with my other colleagues. And so I think that's really important. Recently, we, off the back of some of the work we were doing around social media misinformation, after I had a big stint in the media, the journalists kept asking me, what can consumers do? What can consumers do? Or what are the solutions for this? And I've had a really hard time answering that beyond, that we need stronger regulations, consumers can look for this, that, and the other. But the one thing that kept coming up was, should academics like you, and should scientists, and should, doctors and clinicians be on social media, kind of trying to dispel some of this misleading health and medical information? And of course I thought yes, but I just really, as myself, couldn't speak to that and what that took and how it all worked. And so I went to our social media team at the University of Sydney, and I said, I want to make a post. Would you guys help me make a post? And I didn't really have any expectation that they would even put it on their channels necessarily. But what we did, we did a little bit of a campaign, and it was a really great learning experience for me. It got me out there on social media. I think the post has now been seen by kind of 3 million people. So we were able to track all those metrics, but it was kind of one of those things that I kind of sent an email just saying, hey, you want to do this? And they said yes. And I didn't really think anything would actually come of it, but I just wanted to learn how it all happened. So that was fun and exciting, and hopefully a space that I can maybe play in a little bit more moving forward and get out of my comfort zone. So just wrapping up here, I'm conscious of the time to give some of my top kind of tips for ECRs. From my experiences, don't rule out any opportunity to build your CV. I think, saying that, that doesn't work for me, or that I'm uncomfortable with that, just try it first and then see where you want to go. Try not to rule anything out. Equally, don't pigeonhole yourself, but find your niche. Know what works for you. I try now to see myself as a communication researcher who does communicate their research to the public and works in that kind of health communication, science communication space. You want to see the value in what you do, but be clear about who you are and what you want to achieve. Say yes to things that serve your interests and fulfill you as much as possible. Obviously, we're pulled in 1,000 different directions, but I do think saying, don't immediately say yes, think about it, but do say yes, be collaborative, get involved, and you never know what opportunities can come from that. And equally maximize your time. So think really quality over quantity. How is this going to build your CV? What is it going to do for you? But also, what is it going to do for the people that you're working with or involved in? Also, keep a good record of everything you do. I think sometimes you get caught up and do things, and then when you're going to write a fellowship or promotion application or something, you think, I know I've done more than that, but it's hard to find that paper trail. Save things, keep a good record, emails, you can save anything that's kind of evidence of what you do so you can remember. Keep your CV open and ongoing. Talk yourself up as much as you feel comfortable with. I think imposter syndrome is truly real, but really do try to embrace it as much as you can. And I think that's really important as academics. Aim high, like I said, send those emails, submit to big journals. You never know what can come of it. Yes, you might waste a little bit of time, but something might come off. So I think just really, aim high and don't undersell yourself or your work. Enjoy the ride, embrace the highs and lows, both will come. Embrace the rejections. It's a lot easier said than done. Some really sting, but you can pick yourself up and keep trudging on. And I think really importantly, work with fun, clever people who support you and bring you up. I think for me, that's been such a game changer, and people who, want to see you succeed is so important. So try as much as you can to be surrounded by them. And just lastly, I've done a similar talk like this before, and I ended with this, and I think it's really important to just say, have and make a life outside of it all. Focus on what you love doing and who you love. CVs that's meant to say aren't everything. There's more than just CVs. Thanks so much.
Thank you so much, Brooke. That was wonderful. And so much to learn from these experiences. I'll just check if any person has a question at the, Bridget, you have a question. Do you want to ask the question? Or I can take a question. Okay.
Bear with me 1 second, sir. I'm sorry. I'm just going to unmute Bridget.
Okay. Okay.
Hello, can you hear me?
Yes.
Excellent. That was really awesome. Thank you so much, Brooke. That was really insightful. I noticed right towards the beginning, you mentioned about accessing some media style training. And I wondered, was that just through your institution, or is there somewhere else that you sort of can access that through?
Yeah, so I actually did it through my institution. There's been a number of things that have come up for ECRs about, communicating with the media. And also I was lucky enough to get a little bit of funding to go to NIDER, which is the National Acting School. Very uncomfortable for me actually, but really helped in the communication. But I think there are increasingly opportunities for ECRs through institutions or other kind of related networks such as these to put on things that are in relation to health communication, science communication, or getting involved with the media.
Awesome, thank you.
Right. There's another question, but I don't see the name for this one. But I'll just ask that question here. How do you approach asking colleagues to nominate you, and what do you say? Is there any expectation for quid pro quo?
Yeah, it is. It's completely uncomfortable, actually. I've had some colleagues say, you should apply for this. And that's been helpful, I think, to encourage me. But, I think you can always start with your supervisor or those in your kind of close corner, and they can advise you on who potentially you could ask if it's not them. But I think they're kind of the main point of contact. And, as a supervisor, you want your staff and your team and your students and your ECRs to succeed. So their wins are your wins as well. So I think they're always encouraging. So that I'd use them as your kind of main point of contact, or any kind of senior mentors. But I think I've just always said there's this call, would you help nominate? This is what you have to do. I'm happy to help provide you a few dot points to help get the thing moving because it does take, time sometimes out of their time to do that. But yeah, that would be my advice.
Yeah, thank you. Okay, we'll take one last question. Mugdha, can you make Elham take the question or ask the question?
Yep, that should work.
Elham, if you can hear us, please go ahead and ask the question.
Otherwise, Saurabh, you're welcome to just read the question.
Yeah. Okay. I'll just ask the question then. So the question is, how can PhD students nearing graduation with limited publications strengthen their CV for postdoc applications? That's a regular question, I would suppose. Not specifically with the.
It's so tricky because, time is everything. It's really hard to, build up your publications and your CV in a short amount of time. But I think looking for gaps looking at the funding scheme that you might want to be applying for, or the role you might want to be applying for and what you might need, and looking for gaps there. For example, if in the leadership section, if you're not on any committees, you can look again, nudge your supervisor, your mentor, say, I need kind of committee experience. Do you know anyone you can, anything I can help for? People are always looking for help for things like being on committees, running events, things like that. You can talk to other people within your lab or your team or your supervisor. Try and get on co-authorships in terms of you can maybe be a second reviewer for a systematic review or do things like that. I would just say really look for where the gaps are and see how you can fill them in more of a quick manner. Publishing takes time. Impact takes time for your research to get disseminated and translate to policy and practice. So those are things that are acknowledged that people coming out of their PhD probably won't have or have very limited of. So I think look for where you can fill those gaps. Co-supervision opportunities, like I said, people are always looking for more junior academics to help and support and with those kind of things. So I think just put your hand up where you can.
Right. Okay. Thank you, Brooke, and we'll come back to you in the open discussion shortly. And I'll introduce our next speaker now. So I'm delighted to introduce Dr. Mark Williams. Mark is an internationally recognized cognitive neuroscientist and best-selling author with over 25 years of research experience, including at MIT. He has published more than 70 papers on learning, social cognition, and human connection, and was recently featured on 60 Minutes discussing the impact of digital devices on the developing brains. And today, Mark will be talking about the role of science communication in building an online research presence and the importance and investing in science communication. Okay, Mark, over to you.
Thank you. And thank you to Brooke for being so honest in that presentation. It was really, really informative. And it's nice to have that, the personal side of it as well, because I think it is important that we remember that we're all humans and we've got, lives and families, and we're often at the most difficult part of our career is when we're also having kids, and that can be really, really difficult to try to juggle those two things. So I think we all need to remember that it is a journey, and we need to enjoy that journey. I'm now at the other end of that journey, hopefully not too far down the other end. I'm no longer a full-time academic, so I just write now, and I'm in the media quite regularly. And I do keynote presentations all over the world, which is really, really fun. I have an agent, so a lot of the stuff that I used to have to do myself and that you would all be doing yourselves now is done through the agent, which is really, really cool. Makes life a lot easier, but it does take a lot of work to get to that point that an agent's actually going to take you on. I've been in, I'm trying to think, I've been in, I think, probably 7 or 8 documentaries now, documentaries on the ABC, Catalyst, as well as on Channel 10. I was in Mirror Mirror, and so on. So I've been in quite a lot of documentaries, and I think yeah, I actually lost count, but I've been in media all around the world. I actually had a production company come out from Germany about 6 months ago and do a documentary with me for the largest German TV program, which is pretty cool. And how did I get to that point? Well, it didn't happen overnight. Of course, these things build up and you get that reputation over time. And a lot of that comes from being online, but also I mean, a lot of that was actually done before there was the online and before there was social media, to be honest, or a lot of social media. But it just takes being willing to actually say yes. I think one thing that people don't realize is that when you do get opportunities to be in the media, they only, when they come, as Brooke, I'm sure, will be very happy to explain as well, that they come very fast and they come very quick, and you've got to respond very quickly, and then it goes away very quickly. So it's like a splash in the pan. It's really, really fast and it's really quick, and then it's dead. And so you've got to really respond to it straight away. You can't get an email from 10 News Plus and not respond to it within a couple of hours, because if you don't, then you've lost that opportunity. So you need to respond really quickly to any media opportunities, and you need to be willing to be available for them. If that's something you actually want to do. So it's sort of something you need to decide if it's something you want to do. But it can be very rewarding because, of course, you're getting your research out to a lot more people. And I think that's, one of the reasons for doing it. And I know a lot of people are scared of social media, especially as academics, because there is so much nonsense in social media. But I think that's why we should be on social media, because we should be stopping that false information. We should be the ones that are actually saying, yes, this is true, or no, this isn't true, and be honest and open about that, because there is so much nonsense on there. And people believe what they hear, right? And so we need to be out there actually giving them that information. And I think that's a really important thing. We also know that both the granting bodies and the universities are very aware of the impact of your research. And one of the ways you can showing impact's really hard, but one of the ways you can show impact is actually through how many media presentations you do, how interested the media is in what you're doing, and also, your online presence and how often you're online, and how many followers you basically can have a big impact, or can show how much of an impact your research is actually having, or how much you're actually out there in the real world. So I think it's really important for us to be out there these days, to get rid of the false information, but also so that we can get promoted much more quickly and have more opportunities and get grants, because as I said, the grants have all got this now, how impactful is your research, and that's a hard thing to prove unless you're actually out there showing it. So I was asked to talk specifically about the online presence. One of the best ways to be online, I think, is through LinkedIn. LinkedIn is a lot nicer, let's say, than the other platforms, because it's much more professional. So you're putting your face there. You've got to put, your previous employment. You got to put your current employment. You put the degrees you've got and where you got them and all those sorts of things. So we can very easily track whether or not someone's a bit real or not. And people are much more careful on LinkedIn because of the fact that they're there, right? And their organization that they work for can see what they're actually saying, and their previous employees can see what they're saying. So it's a much friendlier and nicer way to get into social media. And it's a great way to actually make connections, right? And so making connections on social media is really important. And I would advise you all to try and make connections with everybody you know on LinkedIn, because then they're going to like your posts and you're going to like their posts. And that'll actually generate, through the algorithm, of course, you'll get more people actually seeing what you're putting on LinkedIn. And be really honest about who you are on LinkedIn, like, what level you're at, what you're actually doing. I have had people in the past will, have a go at something that I put on there, and then I'll actually check where they're from, and they'll actually have put on there that they're a senior researcher University of Sydney or something, and then I'll actually check it, and they're actually not. And it's like, and then I can actually just say on the social media platform, you're not that person. So, pull your head in, basically, which is really handy and something that you need to be monitoring as well. But the other thing on LinkedIn you can do is you can start a newsletter. So I have a newsletter called Rethinking the Brain, and I think at the moment I have about 7,000 or 8,000 subscribers to that newsletter. And so when I write the newsletter, it not only goes onto LinkedIn, it also gets emailed to every one of those subscribers who are on LinkedIn. So not only do I have to rely on the algorithm to feed them the information, they'll get an email with that post as well, which is really, really handy. And if you do that regularly, you'll actually generate quite a lot of subscribers who will actually be, interested in what you're doing, and listening in to what you're doing. And again, like other people's, and subscribe to other newsletters as well, because that helps them, but it also, generates a bit of a connection between the two of you. So I would really suggest that you start a newsletter if you're interested, and make it something, reasonably catchy so that you get lots of people signing up to it. But that evolves over time. It's not something that you'll get lots and lots of subscribers straight away. It will take time. I've been on LinkedIn. No, I have no idea how long I've been. Quite a long time. Because of the fact that it is a good way to generate. And I actually got onto LinkedIn originally because I just moved back from the US and I wanted to keep in touch with colleagues all around the world because I'd made good friendships and was doing collaborations around the world. But that then just built from there to now it's, ended up being pretty much my career, which is in the media and selling books and doing all those sorts of things, which is very cool. LinkedIn can also does often result for me anyway, in you getting media attention. So, put things on LinkedIn and make sure you put the @ and links to organizations that will be relevant to what you're actually talking about so that they actually get it as well. I think a lot of people don't use the social media well. They'll post something, but they won't actually then link it to all the people who it's relevant for. And you need to really be doing that regularly. If you do get on media, when I was on 60 Minutes a couple of weeks ago, I posted a reel from that and I linked it to 60 Minutes, which meant, of course, it went pretty much viral, right? Because 60 Minutes has a huge following. And so I actually got a lot more followers through that. So make sure you're also linking in those and also linking the journalists that you're actually talking to, because they're going to want to promote their work. And if you're promoting their work for them, they're going to love you and they're going to actually want you to come back. So by promoting their work as well, which, also when you're collaborating with people, if you collaborate with someone and you have authored paper, then link them in when you actually post something on that paper so that they get the link so that they can like it and it'll go to all their followers as well, which is good for you as well and also good for them because you're advertising their work. We need to be pretty strategic about that sort of thing so that it gets out there and more people are actually talking about it and seeing it. If you're game to get on things like Facebook and Instagram and these things, it's another audience that you can get to, and it can be quite useful. You just need to be a little bit more careful with Facebook and the other social media platforms. I have I have a main account, which is my personal account, which is private. And I use that as a private account, which I've had for a long time. And then attached to that is my professional page, which is open. And that is also my Instagram account. I don't use Instagram personally at all, but so I have, my own personal Facebook account, which is private, and only people who I know are actually get access to that. And then I have the professional one, which is linked to it, and that's called I think it's the Dr. Mark Williams. And so that's the professional one. And that's where I put all of, when I'm doing presentations, when books are released, when I do all of that sort of stuff. But I think that's really important to think about because you don't want your personal one. You don't want to be putting up pictures of you where you were on the weekend and stuff on your professional one. Your professional one should be separate, and it should be very professional. And that's going to be really handy in the future for ECRs, because you're going to be going for jobs, and HR departments check out social media, right? They check out all your previous posts and all the rest of it. And so if you've got a personal one that's actually accessible to the public that they can get access to, and you've got lots of stuff on there that maybe doesn't look good now that you're actually going for a job, that can hinder your ability to get a job. So you need to be careful of that as well. So by making it private, you get rid of those problems as well, which is very good. And then also you can then put your newsletter that you're writing on LinkedIn onto those other websites as well. So you just put a link to the LinkedIn one, and people will then have to go to the LinkedIn one and actually subscribe to it. So you get more subscribers that way as well. Just a little hint there. If you put in if you go into the other social media packages, but do be aware it's a lot more toxic. There are some awful stuff that happens on those ones. You've got to remember that it's not personal. That there are idiots out there. And you can just ignore them. And I wouldn't start a fight with people on those things. I think on LinkedIn, not a fight, but on LinkedIn, you can have critical conversations. You can talk back and forth and actually get discussions going. On the other social media platforms, you really can't. As soon as somebody starts criticizing, I would shut them down. I would just ignore them. I wouldn't actually try and get into trying to convince them, because it does then just escalate and can cause a lot of problems. And that's from personal experience. I don't do it anymore. I actually don't look at any of my comments on the other social media platforms. I only look at them on LinkedIn, and I only get involved in discussions on LinkedIn because I know who the person is, and it's much easier to have a decent conversation there. With the media, I think the media is actually starved for good academics and good researchers who can actually comment. I'm constantly getting notifications. I have a phone full of contacts for media people, especially the producers, and they're all trying to fill time. I think you need to realize that if you're talking about something like Sunrise, which I'm on pretty regularly, they've got 3 hours every morning that they've got to fill, and they've got to fill it with something. And so they're pretty keen to get contacts on there who can give them information that they don't have, or can give them honest and reliable information. And so if you can get your name into one of those things, you actually will get quite a bit of return love from them quite regularly. But you've got to be careful. I have seen people who will just, every time they call, they'll accept it and go in and talk. And sometimes they're not actually an expert in the area. And so you need to make sure that you are an expert. So it is okay, but they actually like it if occasionally you say no, because it means that you are being honest with them about what you're a professional in, right? What you've actually got expertise in. And so, but also, think about someone you could actually recommend, because that works really well as well. I do that quite regularly, where I'll have a producer contact me and say, I want to talk about, I don't know, menstrual cycles. And I'll be like, no experience or expertise in that area, but I know blah, 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 and I'm sure they'd be happy to talk to you. And then I give them their phone number and their contact details. And then if they then get, because they'll say, I was talking to Mark and he said that you were an expert in this, would you mind? Of course, then if they get a media request that they can't fulfill, but they think you can, then they'll, of course, recommend you. So it actually creates a bit of a group of people who are all recommending each other, who have expertise in that area. And again, it means the experts are out there actually speaking about these things in a way which is getting the truth out there rather than the nonsense that we hear quite a bit. Do be careful with some of the media outlets. Some of them can be a little bit harsher. And so always check what the media outlet is and what they commonly are producing. I did, for example, have an experience with one of the evening programs, which is very shock jockey in its presentations, and I got stung really badly by that, and I actually didn't do any media stuff for about 3 years after that because I got stung so badly. So do be careful if it's one of the ones that like to have more extreme content or those sorts of things, because once they've filmed you, if it's a recorded event, once they've filmed you, you don't actually see how they cut it up, how they edit it, and that can be a problem. So you do need to be careful. But again, by returning to them several times means you get a really good rapport with them, and it works a lot better. You've also got to remember that there's different types of media. So there's live media and then there's recorded stuff. So I started off doing a lot of documentaries, and I've done 2 big documentaries with Catalyst, and I've done 4 or 5 with ABC more generally, and done Mirror and done one for Germany. And those are great because you spend a lot of time with the producers talking about what you're going to do first. And they do the research, and then they come back to you and they decide, what they're actually going to put into it. And so I really enjoy doing those things because it's actually an interaction and a collaboration between you and the producer that actually ends up producing the documentary. And also you get to record it all first. And so if you stumble over something or make mistakes, you can then go back and do it again constantly, and you get to do multiple takes from different angles until you're completely sick of whatever you're talking about, which is good because it gets really nice. If you're doing live, such as Sunrise or Today or things like that, it is live and it's extremely stressful. And I wouldn't recommend doing one of those until you've done a few pre-recorded ones first, because you come in, you get mic'd up, they put your makeup on, all the rest of it. Yeah, they put makeup on you. They then have you standing there waiting until they have an advert come on, and then you go straight in, sit down, hello, and then it's 1, 2, 3, you're on, and then you're off and you go away. And often it's quite a blur, and it takes a long time to get used to that. So I would be careful about doing the live ones. The best ones I find, which I do weekly probably, are radio interviews, and the easiest ones. And ABC Radio, again, are always looking, especially the talkback radios, are always looking for researchers and experts to actually talk on those programs. And they're much easier because they're very, it's just a chat, right? And usually it's just on the phone, or you can go into the studio, which can actually be quite fun especially if you're around Parramatta or if you're in the city, because those are the 2 areas here in Sydney anyway. And they're more long form, so you get more time to talk, but also I find them a lot more relaxing and a lot more informative. And you'll get questions from the audience sometimes, if you're willing to do that, which can be fun and can be really, really interesting. The other thing is, make sure you know what program you're on and the feel of it. You don't want to go into, say, 10 News Plus in a fun, jovial way, because 10 News Plus is no news program. They want you to be serious and they want you to look professional. And the same way, you don't want to go into Sunrise being all very stoic and I'm serious and all the rest of it, because if you get on the couch, which is the #1 spot to be, being on the couch, if you get on the couch, they're going to want to have a little banter with you, and they're going to want to have you laughing and having a bit of fun, and you're not going to get back on if you're not doing that. So be aware of the program you're on and the expectation when you do that. And the other thing is, be nice to them. I've seen especially academics who see it as a chore to be in there, and then they're not nice to the producers, and they're not nice to the makeup ladies and all the rest of it, and they don't get asked back. And so we're all humans, and they do like you being nice to them. And when you finish, they'll often say thanks for doing that. And if you just turn around and say, oh, it was actually quite fun, I'd like to do it again, if there's the opportunity, let me know, and then they'll put you on their list. Whereas if you just go, oh, okay, thanks, and just leave, they won't put you on their list. So make sure you do tell them that you're happy to come back, because then you'll get on their list, and before you know it, you'll be doing lots of those things, and then you'll have lots of stuff to put on your LinkedIn posts, which will mean that you'll get a lot more followers on LinkedIn, which means your research will actually get out there and the world will actually know what the truth is and what the research is actually showing, rather than all the nonsense that we're seeing on these platforms at the moment. So I'm going to stop there because I just talked a lot, didn't I? But it is fun. It is a lot of fun. And the way you get there is by having a good online presence, because that's where they actually see you. Not, if you're just producing articles, then it's probably pretty rare that you'll actually get noticed.
Okay. Thank you so much, Mark, and for the wonderful insights in the media industry that we probably didn't know at all of what goes on inside. Just before we take questions specifically for you, Mark, I think I can just get started with, it seems that it requires, like at the ECR stage, you're not an authority on any specific things. And then it seems that the media might only ask for the authoritative figures. And the second thing would be, it itself seems like another job in itself, apart from the research that you're already doing. So what would you say to this?
Yeah, two really good questions. The first one, I would say ECRs are experts in the particular area that they've just done their PhDs, right? And that is really important to remember. The first time I got into the media, actually, it went viral, went across the world. Back then we didn't have viral because I don't think, well, no, so Facebook didn't exist. That's a long time ago, isn't it? But it was one of my PhD articles got published and ended up New York Times. It was in the New York Times. I was interviewed for the New York Times. I was interviewed for BBC. I was interviewed for all over the place. I went across the world. There was thousands of articles written about it. I was actually in the UK at the time because I was on my way to the US, and the BBC actually contacted me and asked me to go in and do an interview in the BBC, and that I was straight out of my PhD, so I was very raw and very green, and it just happened to be that article got noticed, and I've had several articles since then that have got noticed, but it's definitely something that I've built up over time, and I've taken advantage when those opportunities have come about and done something about it. And then, I've also had amazing mentors, right? The supervisor I had at that stage could have easily taken all those media opportunities, and he didn't. He gave them to me because he also used to get a lot of media stuff anyway, and he wanted to guide me in it. So it's also about that, is maybe talk to your supervisor about whether or not they get many media opportunities that they don't take, and whether or not you could perhaps be involved in those or somehow, be mentored in those, which is also a good way to actually get that going. So I would say they're probably more expert in their particular niche than their supervisor, right? Because the supervisor's a little bit more removed. So I wouldn't say, but it's going to be more niched. Whereas the longer you go on, the more people you've had in your group and in your lab and all the rest of it. So the bigger your pool is, I suppose.
Right.
Sorry, what was the second question? I forgot.
I myself have forgotten.
You've forgotten again.
No, it was about like how to manage. Like this seems like learning about media, doing all this media and everything seems like another job in itself. On top of the research that you're already doing, it feels like it has a lot to learn and a curve to learning all of these things.
There's definitely a learning curve to it. It definitely is quite stressful when you do it. But you've got to remember that it's just for a really short period of time each time it happens. So that first event that I had, there was probably 3 days where it just went viral. And then about 2 weeks later, it came out in New Scientist as well. New Scientist did an article about it. And then I had another 2 days where it just went absolutely ballistic. And I had lots and lots of people wanting to talk to me. And then it went again, right? And so it's only it's like little sprints, right? You do this little sprint for a couple of days, and then you don't hear anything at all for months and months and months. And you sort of forget about it. And then all of a sudden you get another little sprint. So the media stuff it's not that draining because it's only a couple of days every 6 months, 12 months, whatever it happens to be, at the beginning.
Right. Okay. So thank you, Mark. One specific question to you, Mark, and then I'll just open it up for general questions to both of you. So one last question specifically to Mark would be, in your experience, is the media biased towards, or Mugdha, are you trying to get the speaker to ask that question?
Sorry, Sarah, but it's an anonymous
Right. Okay.
question, so
Okay,
I'm not
that's fine.
sure.
Okay, that's fine. So the question is, in your experience, Mark, is the media biased towards English native speakers when they engage with the researchers?
Oh, good question. It's hard for me to say because I'm an English native speaker, so I haven't ever been knocked back because yeah. So I don't. If it's newspaper or if it's written, if it's a journalist who wants to talk to you and just do a written article on it, which is a great way to get into the media and an easy way to get into the media, then obviously no, because they're not going to care. Probably, I would imagine, especially the live programs probably would be here in Australia, but then they wouldn't be other places. So I've been on live TV in South Africa and in the UK and in Germany and all over the place. And, I'm not a native speaker in those countries. And so I would have a thick accent in the US quite a few times. And they haven't cared. But yeah, I imagine possibly like here in Australia, possibly yes, with the live TV.
Right. Okay. Thank you, Mark. Now we can have general questions, and this one, either of you can take it. Do you have any suggestions for people whose research areas are not easily translated for the public? Are there any other avenues for scientific communication? I think this could be applied to like some people who are in computational modeling, for example. It becomes very hard to translate it to the general public. So any thoughts on these?
I think every area can be translated. I think, computational modeling, I think, is huge at the moment because of all the algorithms and all of this sort of stuff that's going on. And the AI, right? You have very good insights into AI and all those sorts of things. So you could be constantly in the media if you wanted to. I think you've just got to think outside the box. You can't think it's just this experiment. You have to think, how is this impacting more widely, and what does this actually mean more widely, rather than just be thinking this is one experiment that I've completed. How do I get this into the media, rather than what's happening at the moment and how does this have an impact on that, or how does this inform that?
Yeah, and I was just going to add, I completely agree, to see the bigger picture and also think cleverly about what media outlet it might be targeted for, because it doesn't just have to be, mainstream necessarily. They could be a science journal where they're writing kind of, or, for me, lots of people in my field write in general practitioner journals. And so, different audiences as well. So I think, like Mark said, everything can be media worthy to some degree.
Oh, okay. Thank you, Brooke. Okay, there was one question as well, and I think again is open for both of you. Where do you see the more impact of your media visibility? Example, grant applications, international audience, and opportunities to collaborate. I think you partly answered this, but maybe if you can speak and tell the ECRs what specific outcomes would be.
You want to go first, Brooke?
Sure. Yeah. So I guess for me, the biggest thing for me as still a struggling research focused academic who works off grant, my salary and livelihood is based on grant funding. For me, it is in the grant applications that I write. I think it gives you an edge when you're writing about, for example, I submit to the National Health and Medical Research Council grants, and they have kind of top 5 or top 10 publications, and you have to write about the impacts it's had. And I think it gives an edge to be able to say you've done all this media, you've engaged with these different audiences, other than just, you've published in this really great journal and it's kind of just sat there and got cited like every other kind of paper. So for me, it's there, but I think it has benefit in all of those points that you raised.
Yeah, completely agree. And I think all the universities now are looking at impact as well. So, for promotion, for all those things, I think it's really, really important. But especially for grants, I think now, because you've got to have an impact. And it doesn't matter whether it's ARC or NHNMRC.
Yeah. And one other question, this was asked right at the start itself, and too early for these grants. How do you avoid becoming discouraged in today's funding landscape? Not specifically for today's media communication or science communication and building your CV, but any insight into this?
I'll go and just say, for me, I think it is really about seeing the bigger picture. It is discouraging, 100%. But if you wake up every day and you love the work that you're doing and you see the value and the impact that it's going to have, I think you just have to push the discouragement aside and keep trudging on. Like I said at the beginning of my talk, I picture myself right now just like surfing a wave. And if the funding wave crashes, then I'll figure out what I'm going to do next. But right now I'm having fun kind of riding that wave and really enjoying it and think I'm doing impactful stuff. So I try to see kind of that bigger picture because the other stuff is out of my control.
That's awesome. I don't think it's not discouraging for me at all because it's a huge opportunity, right? Because of the fact that there's so much nonsense out there. People actually want to hear from academics. People want to hear from people who are actually experts and are looking for that and are desperate for that. And so the fact that we are in a space at the moment where there's so much nonsense out there, people, I think, are now getting sick of it and want the truth. And so I think it's a huge opportunity rather than being discouraging that we should all be taking advantage of while we can.
Yeah, absolutely. Mana, you've raised your hand.
Yeah, actually,
yeah, I'm aware of the time.
Yeah, me too. I wanted to ask a very quick question, and I will close the webinar if that's okay. So it's about the position. The question is for both of you. It's about posting on social media. There's often so what elements when I see posts like I'm thrilled to have spoken at X conference. So from your perspective, what actually makes a post meaningful and valuable to others rather than just self-promotional?
You can take this one first, Mark.
And giving value rather than just saying I presented at so. Think about something that you learnt there that you actually thought was mind-blowing, right? Because we go to conferences and we do see lots of really cool stuff. Start with that, I just heard at this conference that blah blah blah, this new finding which has just blown us all away and is really really cool, and I was really pleased to have been there to see it, and then link them into it, whoever it was that you're talking about that did really cool stuff, so that they'll like that you like what they're doing, and that's what's looking more broadly, right? It's about you've always got to try and give value in some way, and that's either looking more broadly at your own research or giving them something else that you've got the opportunity to see that they don't have the opportunity to see.
Sure, thank you. Brooke, Bernie.
Yeah, I agree. I think that's great advice, and I would just say that like if you're promoting the media story that you just did in The Age or something, that you link them in, and it gives them also an audience and people will follow that and gives them that kind of stuff. But there is a bit of self-serving definitely nature to social media that I think we all have to agree with. But if you can make it more meaningful to your audience, I think it will build your following up more and only enhance then your visibility and your impact.
Correct. Thank you very much. So Rob, is there anything else or we need to
I think we can bring this to a close, but a huge thank you to both of our two speakers, Brooke and Mark, for such generous and practical and genuinely useful talks today. I think we have learned a lot in this ECR and what we can implement in our ECR careers. Mana, do you want to say anything before we close?
I'll second that. So I just wanted to thank you so much to our both speakers for the very invaluable insight. I personally learned a lot, and it's a great reminder that academic identity goes beyond publications, and we know where we need to focus our precious time and effort. So before closing, I would like to thank our ACNS ECR subcommittee members for organizing this event and the ACNS committee for providing this platform for ECRs. Please keep an eye out for details on our next webinar in October. And if you have any suggestions for topics and speakers, please feel free to contact us. And thank you all very much for joining us today. And please enjoy the rest of your day. Thank you. Bye.